see. A lot of people came out to see my presentation. Yes. Well, it's not that great of a presentation. It's very similar to the prior years, but we'll go through it quickly. I think everyone has my synopsis in front of them. I think Mike gave everything out. Just quickly, we are obviously we are hired to audit the city's financial statements. But I want you to know, as I have in the past, that we just audit the funds. We don't audit the fixed assets or the long-term debt account group, and that's because basically those aren't accounted for properly, and they never have been, so we just really audit the funds, there's nothing wrong with that. We also don't do a full accrual accounting, which is in accordance with GASB 34, which not a lot of other municipalities do, but some do. And again, it's because of the cost that would be involved to be able to do that would really probably exceed the benefit that's derived from that. The financial statement we do is available to any of the lenders that we have, and they're fully accepted, the financial statements, in the manner that we do them. These are your financial statements. They're not our financial statements. Although we assist in the presentation of the financial statements and putting them together, we go to great lengths to make sure that any of the adjustments we made, any of the financial statement disclosures that are in there, et cetera, that Mike and his group review and approve that presentation. In addition, we also met with the mayor to make sure that he approves of that, where we stood for the financial statements. When we look at the condensed financial statements over the years, there's not a lot to say. I've had here that the general water and sewer funds, condensed financial statements in thousands. There's not a lot of changes from year to year. As you can see, the general fund has about $11.7 million in in total assets. Most of that's in cash. The portion that's not in cash is mostly in due from other governments, which is primarily sales tax and mortgage tax, but some other miscellaneous receivables. So, we're very liquid. We have a lot of cash and a lot of receivables that are quickly liquidated into cash. So we've always been very liquid. Water and sewer, again, not many changes from the previous year. They're a little more dependent on receivables than the general fund, but for the most part, they're again very liquid. The liability section, what we always concentrate on in the kind of the middle of the page is really fund balance. That's how we manage the city and say, are we stronger or weaker than in the prior year? As you can see, our total fund balance in 2024 for the general fund was about $9.6 million versus about $8.9 million in 2023. So we got a little better. The water fund went down a little bit, and the sewer fund basically stayed about the same. That's a little deceiving in that we do continue to provide money to the water and the sewer fund, especially the sewer fund, from the general fund to prop up operations. And we're trying to get to the point where we don't need to do that. We have hope for this coming year that, especially in the sewer district, that may come to fruition. When we look at unrestricted fund balance, so what we like to see is a minimum of 17%. We're at 17% in the general fund. We're at 70% of the water fund. The water fund has a good amount of fund balance and it has no problems. The sewer fund has some continual losses, although the fund balance is relatively stable at 27%. It does have some continuing losses that we have, as I said, we have to be a little concerned about. When we look at the revenues and expenses, you can see, again, there was no real anomalies in the past year. We have about $25.5 million of revenue in the general fund, about $2.5 million in the water fund, and about $2 million in the sewer fund. As you can see, the expenses there. The thing I guess I wanted to focus on was a couple of things. You can see the transfers out in the general fund was about $1.4 million. We continue to provide transfers to the sewer fund for operations, to the water fund for operations, although usually it's not continuous in the water fund, it is in the sewer fund, and to capital projects. And that's one of the concerns I have, is that over the past year, we've had some real big, past 3 years, we've had some really large amount of capital projects. Portions of those capital projects, as I mentioned last year, aren't funded by grants, and that the city's portion has to be taken into account. In the past 3 years, the city has provided $4.5 million to the capital projects funds to support those capital projects funds. Don't get me wrong, those things we really need. The roof, every capital project that we've undertaken has been great, but we really have to be careful because eventually we're not going to be able to provide our portion of those projects. That's a lot of money going out the door. The other thing I wanted to mention was if you look at our total expenses in the general fund, it's almost $24 million in 2024. In 2022, as you can see, it was almost $22 million. It's gone up about 8.6%. The water fund's gone up about 9.2%. The sewer fund's actually dropped a little bit, and that's because of the combined sewer overflow project that's actually a little reduced in this year. But the point here is that we've been very lucky in the past 3 or 4 years in that the inflation was so large at 20%. What that did is it increased prices 20% or more. That increased our sales tax revenue. Our expenses did not catch up right away, but they're starting to catch up. As you can see, our expenses were up 9.6% in the general fund. So that, you know, we've been very lucky in that we caught that wave. We've been lucky enough to have some excess monies. Those excess monies we've used for capital projects, which is great. We've got all those things done, but that's not going to continue forever. So we just have to be careful there. When we talk about the required communications that we have with the audit committee or the, in this case, the council, there's no new accounting policies. None of the accounting policies that we've had have been changed. There's no transactions for which there's lack of guidance. There's no sensitive estimates in these financial statements and no sensitive disclosures. As I mentioned, we did propose, and traditionally this is what we've done, we've proposed some adjustments. We proposed transfers of $400,000 and $600,000 respectively to the sewer and capital projects fund to be able to fund, you know, those deficits in those funds. And we also had to make some adjustments for, in the case of the floating solar project, there's about $3.1 million in revenues that we cannot recognize in the current year because they won't be collected. That project has a couple grants that won't pay us until after the project's completed, and then one of them for a couple of years after that. So we can't recognize those revenues until they're current. So we do have some, if you looked at the capital projects, you'll see we have a deficit of about $1.8 million, and that will be erased when we can actually build these revenues and collect them. But until such time, we do have a deficit in those funds. We had no disagreements with management, and we did get a management representation letter, which I said in the past is very important to us because it does make sure that Mike and his group has looked at our financial statements, looked at the adjustments we made, looked at the combinations we made, and is in agreement with that. We did have a couple of recommendations, and they're recommendations that are continuing from last year. And I really think this first one's a big one. Approving and monitoring capital projects. As I mentioned, in the past 3 years, we have transferred $4.1 million from the general fund to fund capital projects. We've also expended $23 million in the past 3 years in capital projects. This is kind of unprecedented. We haven't done this in many, many years, not to this level. And you know, we've got a bunch of things happening. I think it's starting to slow down, but we really have to be concerned about, as I mentioned last year, you know, we were sold, the council was sold, floating solar project was only going to cost us $200,000. To date, we've expended over $900,000 in that project. Why? Because we weren't really told the whole story. You know, of course, the construction is covered, but the engineering costs aren't covered. Again, the water tanks, the same thing. Everybody says, oh, the project's totally covered. It's not. The construction is covered, but the engineering costs right now, $155,000 for the water tanks, is not covered. So we really have to, as a council, be monitoring capital projects to make sure that when we approve them, we know what the total amount of funding is for the project, know how it's going to be funded, and know what the city's portion is. And then monitor it, because we've seen in the past many of these projects get out of control, and then all the excess spending comes down to as the city's portion. So that, and the only other really comment we had was Albany County Sewer Conduit Debt, and that's an issue for Mike, which he understands. We had that last year. He didn't understand what the information I needed. We've clarified that, so that should be taken care of in this year. That's what I have. It's good news, I think. You know, we actually had general fund profits. We continue to have some losses in the sewer fund, but I do believe the combined sewer overflow project is 13 years into 15 years out of it. It's coming to an end. I think we're going to end up in good shape there, so that those expenses should slow or stop. So, are there any questions? My pleasure.
Gilly's here, and I'm not here as a, well, I am here as a taxpayer, but most of all, as the deputy majority leader of the county legislature, I met with you people, which I told you 2 weeks ago, that in a meeting with Danny McCoy, he had told me that the county was finally getting ready to finalize purchasing the property at the Cohoes Community Center. So after negotiations for the last week or so, Danny called me in a meeting yesterday, and he informed me that as of now, the county owns the Cohoes Community Center. And it finally took place after the biggest problem since we tried to purchase it was the finance problems that the other owner had. So now it's finalized, and he assured me that work will be done to get the thing going. And that's all I want to tell you. I want to tell the council and yourself as mayor, and apparently the public too. But that was,
thanks for your efforts.
all right, thank you. But there's always the possibility he's been lying to me.
Thank you. Dan Gaudio, Caldwell Banker Prime Properties. We were here 2 weeks ago to summarize and present the project for my client, BDJ Construction, on the library project for 25 units, a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units, totally self-funded. We're not looking for any federal or state grants for the project. Totally privately funded. We will be looking for exemptions on sales tax for construction materials, but we have submitted our proposal and with a letter of proof of financing for the project, and we're hoping that it will get approved, and you know, my client is very interested in getting started on the project.
Yep. Carl Godfrey with Remodel Now. I'm going to be the other 50% owner of the library with BDJ Capital. And we just want to hit on a couple notes that we are going to be saving the integrity of the exterior of the building. It's an iconic building. It's been a staple building in our community for years. So we're really going to hit on saving the exterior of that building, not touching it, preserving it back to obviously the shape that it needs to be in. So.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago I had made a comment regarding, the plans for the exterior of the building, and it's all about just cleaning it up. I made a comment, either sandblasting or power washing. It basically will be power washed, cleaned up, and made more presentable.
Yep. Any questions from you?
Council, any questions? When would we start with the project?
As soon as possible. So obviously we're aware there's a break-in, I'm going to think about 2 days ago or a day ago in the library. So if the vote goes and it's in our favor, we'll be going down to get fencing immediately, fencing it in, hanging our banners. We want to get Wi-Fi hooked up. We'll get it under surveillance, get cameras hooked up on the property. And then we're going to start immediately with the engineering, working with Sharon and planning and zoning to get everything through. And as soon as that happens, we'll be ready to start construction immediately. We can, if you guys request that, we can provide anything. The funding is not the problem.
About how many years did you say it would take? About the
start to finish, I would say probably by the time we get through the process, if we plan for 2 years and under, we'd be in great shape because it's going to take 4 months of engineering, architects getting through planning and zoning, which you guys know you only meet once a month. So by the time we get all the final approvals and we're ready to start demoing, I would say that we'd be leasing within 1.5 years, 2 years. Anything else?
Thanks,
Yep.
Thank you.
Todd Walton, Chief of Police, also Cohoes resident at Woodlawn Circle. I just wanted to clarify some of the things he said about the break-in at the library. Obviously, empty buildings are a problem, and this manifested itself on Sunday with 2 calls the police responded to for the Cohoes, former Cohoes Library church building. In the first one, the officers went there. They located a female inside who had been staying there. A lot of what looked like to be the proceeds of larcenies from the Capital District. As a matter of fact, we had to photograph over 150 collectible coins that looked like they were probably stolen. They had a whole setup down there with burglar tools, with bolt cutters and hacksaws. They had already started, I guess, dismantling parts of that building for the copper piping. They also had what we didn't know at the time, but looked like to be 2 real guns. They were actually replica guns, which we had to call in a detective to sort that out before anybody, goes handling the weapons. We have to verify if they're real or not. If I had pictures of them, I would defy anybody here to tell me that they wouldn't have thought those were real guns if they were pointed at them or something. So the person who was caught inside that building was arrested, was released as it happens today, and sure enough, at 7:30 the same night, police responded again. This time the same female was inside the building. She stated there were other people inside the building, that basically she was told by someone, go over there and just pick a room and you can start staying there. There was evidence that there had been other people who had been staying there. We had to call in a canine from the Albany County Sheriff's Department, because everybody knows the size of that building, to do a search through the building. They didn't find anybody else, but there was obvious evidence of people who had been staying in there. She was arrested again for the criminal trespass. I know DPW has come by and secured it, but over the last period of months, DPW has been called by us many times to secure it. And the nature of that building makes it very difficult to monitor with the parts that are below ground level, who might be breaking in, who might be going in at another angle. And it's just, again, if it sits longer, it's going to be a bigger problem for us. I was surprised that this was going on to the extent that it was, with the burglar tools and the evidence of people being in there and things being stolen that we've had to post for neighboring municipalities to determine if they're proceeds from things that were being stolen and larcenies that were taking place in other areas. But it's just not going to do any good the longer it sits there empty. We can board it up, we can patrol it all we want, but there's no doubt people will keep coming back, and going inside and doing what they want to do with it and taking the risks of being caught. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that.
Do you think I regular patrol going to the Richard?
I'm sorry?
Regular patrol going on?
Yes.
2 hours?
Yeah, irregularly, so that, people can't really time it, is the best way to do it. Go by again kind of quickly, go from a different direction, however you're getting in there, walking around it, doing all those things. But I think everybody here knows that it's just becoming a bigger problem than it used to be. For a while it was people hanging out trying to get the free Wi-Fi, and that was leading to some problems of the people who were patronizing and getting harassed. We had break-ins over the years. We've had people vandalize and damage the inside. People attempt to steal whatever little money there was from the inside of it, but as a vacant building, it's just going to be that much worse.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Anyone else?
Ed Tremblay from 247 Columbia Street. I'm a lifelong Cohosier and a 50-plus year member of St. John's Church. My wife's relatives were part of people that built that church, and I'm currently the senior warden of St. John's. So I just wanted to speak in support of trying to do something sooner than later with the building. I'm old enough to have been going through the process that we had back in the 90s with the Silliman Church across the street. Unfortunately, there was a number of projects that came forward that weren't moved upon, and before we knew it, the building had started to collapse, and then it was beyond repair. So as a being part of the church that built that building, we're very supportive of trying to get that sold and secured as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you. Questions? Thanks, Ed. Anyone else?
I'm Joanna Doggett. I live at 16 Sandusky Street, have been there for 30 years, and I wanted to speak on Mohawk being housed at the Hill Station. As we're all aware, there's only 23 days until the change happens between Mohawk and ambulance. There's much concern that the Hill Station will lose its fire engines, resulting in slower response to fire calls. Central Station, where ambulance is housed, is centrally located, making it a better place to dispatch from. I wanted to know whether Mohawk has toured Central Station, because there was talk about that at the last meeting, and if so, is there anything that they would want redesigned in there? I know they did have things they wanted redesigned at the Hill Station, and I also wanted to know if they, whichever place they do choose to go to, are they able to get the redesigned stuff done prior to starting, or will they be able to work out of the station while it's being completed? And if those two options aren't viable, is there a backup plan for where we want to house Mohawk?
Sean, you have a point of contact with Mohawk, any of those things come up?
I do not know if they've toured Central Station. I know that the last conversation that I had with Mohawk is that they did tour the Hill Station. There is not the current situation with Mohawk would be that they would be in a roving position if they don't find housing in the city, or they would stay mobile and respond to calls from that location. They did say that they would be willing to house with the fire department in the Hill Station. They've been up there multiple times to look at the construction and the building. I do not know what talks have been, what have been out of those conversations. I believe those conversations were done with the chief.
And when are you guys voting on what happens?
Well, this is the first workshop conversation we've had about it.
Okay.
So something, we would have to move on something soon, or, Mohawk we would have to talk to Mohawk about what their plan would be without being in the Hill Station. Whether they looked at property in the city, or they responded, from those moving positions that I said.
Yeah, because
But I'll talk about it a little bit more
okay.
as well.
Because I feel like it would be very detrimental for the people on the Hill to lose having a fire engine up there. So it would be nice if they could work with the Cohoes Fire Department. Thank you.
Thanks, thank you. Anyone else?
Hello. 2 weeks ago, I came to you guys regarding the pothole situation in Maine, and I know usually people come here to address problems with the area. I'm here to say thank you for resolving that issue and getting the streets repaired. They really needed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Also on the short list to be paid, that section.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
I know all of you, so hi, thank you. I just want to reiterate my obvious concern for the Hill Firehouse. Being a lifelong Hill resident and knowing what that firehouse means to everyone that lives there, our response times, just having their presence there, I think sharing with the ambulance is definitely something that the fire department would work. They've done it at Central, they can do it on the Hill. I think losing that is a danger to our community and to the residents that live there. If you live, all the way up at the tip bordering the North Colony border like I do, you're pretty far from anyone else. And if Central is out on a call, that leaves the island, which is, there's a train track that runs between us and them. So they're certainly not getting to us, or the schools that are also in the Hill area. I think that's a huge concern for us. And the more residents that we have so many more calls. I think that the Hill is the second leading firehouse for calls and for call volume. So that includes 2 schools and a lot of residents. And I think that to go down, to lose one of our firehouses and one of our engines would be really a disservice to the community, to the citizens, to the taxpayers. And I think that you really need to think about it. I know as a community member, I've certainly been donated a lot of my own personal time fighting this fight about, getting a different ambulance service in and looking at whether the fire department could take that on and what that would look like. And we did a 3-year strategic plan for that. And thank you to the Common Council members that worked on that with me and that were on the task force. I really appreciate it. And I know that you guys will make a good decision for the residents. So thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding because nobody ever discussed going down the Legion or going down a company. I think the discussion was moving the company down to the central station.
I'd like to just correct that. The chief has said that if we don't go on the hill no more, we come down to Central, there's talks about putting that as a spare truck and putting them people, those members, on other vehicles, get it down to 2. So I'm just letting you know what he told me. He's not here. I understand he's not here.
He's not here.
I understand that. I'm just clarifying that has been said to me personally, that was talked about.
Every conversation I've had with him, including this morning, included sending the company down to Central. And he said that was, George, you can speak to this, he's spoken to the officers, and the officers were in favor of that because they prefer, being down. I wasn't part of that conversation. I don't know if George, you want to speak to that, or...
He's also said to me what John's saying right now about getting clear out service and putting more guys in less pieces and putting 722 as a reserve piece because we have no reserve apparatus.
Maybe that was the request some of the members of the department asked him because they liked that idea, but my take, is that it would just be moving the engine. There would be 2 trucks, 2 companies out of Central and one on the island. And then,
There's a lot on number right now. So we're here.
I think
let me clear up anything. If you have any questions, ask me, because that's the idea I have. Tom, that's news to me. That's not a conversation.
I had a discussion with him last day out in front of City Hall when I had stopped here to see Amanda. And that was discussed. I said, we can't stop the hill from closing. We can't hold your hand, even though you said back in 2019 that 24/7 firefighters are going to staff the hill. In your pamphlet, with Chief Lamore, God rest his soul, was gone now. So you did say that. Let's just clarify that.
Yeah, that was my intent. And then
intent isn't a promise. So you made a promise. I'm sorry. But the fact is, the chief did say that to us, and I will tell you that I drive the ladder truck. So I go all over the city for fire calls. Last fall, I sat down on Bridge Ave at 1:30 in the morning for 2 hours waiting for an ambulance. I understand the contract. It's after midnight. You only get 1. Just to let you know that if you put 3 on the island and 3 on the hill, if that happens, as talked about, because the chief said it, that will turn around and we'll have 1 at Cuba Plaza on the 10th floor.
So I'm telling you right now, that's not the plan. The chief doesn't.
All right, I just want everybody to know that if the plan happens, that it was said. Because things get twisted around a little bit.
That's not the plan. It's 2 companies in Central and 1 on the island. If this even happens, I've had no conversations with Mohawk about this. I know Mohawk would like to be stationed at the hill, which would provide, ambulance coverage, 2 ambulances working out of the hill at a minimum. And then you'd have the EMT firefighters on the island, EMT firefighters at Central. So there would be really good medical coverage citywide. And then, the 2 trucks out of Central, which is centrally located in our small city. I don't think that's...
What's on the hill at 1 a.m. when they're on call, dropping a patient off at 3 o'clock in the morning? Let's say 3 in the morning, dropping someone off, they're waiting for 2 hours to offload them. What's on the hill then?
You could go on and say,
I could.
5 fires.
I could. It happens constantly. The numbers on the hill are up 42 from last year alone, right? From January 1 to March, they're up 42 for the hill alone.
So the ambulances for transportation, you would still have the EMT firefighters respond to these calls.
You don't have that. But you're saying, the chief has said that it's going to be staffed 24/7 for emergency purposes. It's not the case. It's not going to
No,
be.
we got 1 ambulance full-time and 1 16 hours.
And what are the hours for that second one yet? Do we know?
They're not there between...
No, it's to be determined. It says between you and the chief to be determined what time that's going to be. Do we know yet? The same as we got right now with the ambulance?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, they were talking about if they had the Hill Station, they could use that as a hub and have, their ambulances that respond to different parts of the capital region.
We also said, because they're so big, that if they're dropping a patient off, they can go over to Samaritan Hospital as well. And years ago, Troy Ambulance then became Empire Ambulance, had one staff in Cohoes on White Street, and then the pump station actually on North Mohawk, and they had one that responded from Troy all the time. So there's no problem for them traveling around either. And some of those departments actually never had a station. Empire went out to Skodak, they sat wherever they sat, waiting for the calls.
I think part of the confusion is that any of the task force meetings we haven't had everyone at. Mohawk has come and presented, the chief has come. Mayor, I don't think you haven't been at any that I've been at, so I think it's a lot of, he said this to this person, or he said that to that person. So I think we want to know the real story. Like, you did run on that, you ran on, we're keeping the Hill Station open, and that is not your position anymore. And so now where do we go from there? Mohawk, is that going to be the hub for Mohawk? Are we going to keep a fire truck there and an ambulance? I think that's what everyone wants to know. I think there's so many, somebody said this, somebody said that, well, it's you. So tell us, you get to tell us.
Well, if in fact Mohawk could be housed there with the fire truck, I'm totally fine with that. My understanding is they wanted to do a build out, a dormitory, if you will, to house all their personnel, and that would not allow for the truck at least to be parked inside.
Because they did, when they presented to our task force, Mohawk specifically was asked and they responded, yes, we would be willing to be housed with an engine.
At the Hill?
Yeah, on the Hill, yes,
Totally
specifically.
fine with that.
So,
Totally fine with that.
great.
And
There's one more question, sorry, Mayor. Why is it that ambulance can't go down in the island station and chief go back to City Hall where they started out to begin with?
sorry, Tom, I didn't.
I'm wondering why that the chief can't come back to City Hall and put them down in the island station.
There's plenty of room.
There's plenty of room down there for them. We talked about that at the public safety meeting as well.
I think it's probably a supervisory issue, interact with the guys.
No, there's only two people down there.
Right, so there's always.
We have an officer down there covering the station. We have an officer. Actually, there's no supervisor at all on the Hill. That's just.
Yeah, that's up to the chief. I mean, I'm not going to tell him where he has to report for duty. He's more hands-on at one of the firehouses than sitting here in office.
My name is Jim Fennon, 210 Manor Avenue, Cohoes. Obviously, I'm a born and raised Cohoesier, so I've got a couple of questions. First, I'm going to start with the library. Is there tax breaks being given citywide for having the plans to go with putting apartments in the what is now the library or the?
No, I think he's spoken to that.
I wasn't here, so that's why it's a question.
We're not going for any pilots, any tax deductions. We're going to pay full city tax from the day of ownership.
That makes me happy. I listen to it all the time, and everybody gets a tax break.
No, we don't do that.
But me on the Hill, and a lot of people that are
No.
taxpayers. Secondly, I have concerns over the firehouse on the Hill. For those of you that don't know, I'm a retired captain from the fire department. I look at this from two perspectives. A few years ago, when the station was closed, there was nobody operating out of that building. My mother-in-law passed away. She lives right behind me on Haven Lane. I beat the fire department from Central, and I was in Waterville at the time. So my concern is the building closing. And I know that historically, what happens when they move a fire truck and they have extra guys, all of a sudden, that fire truck is out of service. Our history in Cohoes is doing that. When I first came on the fire department, there were 12 firefighters working during the day. At least a sign. So people are on vacation, Kelly days, and personal time normally didn't take effect. So the Hill, the island, and an engine ran out of Central Station. Well, eventually, due to depleted manpower, because they didn't get hired, that engine that ran out of Central, that did all the work that the ladder truck is now doing, closed. They took that engine away, and now there's 6 guys working. And the thought is that, from my perspective, because of the history, we all know what prior planning does, right? Prior planning prevents poor performance. And the city doesn't have a plan, and I don't think the city has ever had a plan, because we've talked about 2 firehouses in the city that work. I challenge any of the residents to visit the Hill Firehouse when it's open and have a tour. I challenge the residents in this city to tour Central, because you know that Central Station would probably be condemned, because if it was occupied by someone other than a city entity, they would probably close the building. If anybody walked through and saw the rebar that's coming through the floors because the concrete is falling off the walls, you'd say, this building is not safe. I know you can find that somebody will tell you that it's safe, but it's not. But my concern here is that moving a fire truck to Central Station only puts guys in Central Station. That's like putting too many people in a basket now. And eventually they'll say, maybe we don't need that fire truck. Maybe we don't need those guys. Because I've seen going from 12 to 11 to 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6 to 5. And I even hear rumors of 4. And the building can't handle it. And there has not been a plan in this city. It's all been talked about for updating firehouses. Hell, the roof has been leaking for 36, 37, 39 years since it opened. And they keep saying they're going to fix it, and maybe they do, and maybe they don't. Sometimes the roof gets fixed. But there's not a plan. So what I see is that they're going to say, we'll move this truck to Central Station, we'll let Mohawk live out of the Hill Firehouse, and eventually there won't be 5 guys working. There'll be 4 guys working. So that's my concern. And I don't see a plan, and I have never seen a plan out of City Hall to do anything correctly. They had a group of people that worked very hard to try to work out an ambulance. I can only tell you that I'm a proponent of fire-based ambulance service, and it does work. But for some reason, nobody wants that. I've worked with Mohawk Ambulance, and they're a very professional agency when I worked in the fire department. And I'm very happy to see that there's going to be somebody there. They're going to be showing up when they're called, even whether it's from the Hill or from Central. But I am very concerned that the city is considering moving the apparatus that's supposed to be stationed on the Hill, regardless of the reasons that it's closed. Because every time we talk about closing because of firefighters being not on duty, they forget when they negotiated that there were 12, 11, 10, 9 people working, that they could take that time off. But my concern is they're going to move that engine to the central part of the city, and then eventually you don't need those people. So that's my concern. Question?
I mean, the cold hard fact is that 1/3 of the time, the Hill is not manned. We have 8 guys on each platoon, 8 firefighters on each platoon, but there have been days, one day where 1 person came in. There have been days where, many days where 3 come in. A lot of days where 4 come in. Or, we're paying overtime. You could bankrupt the city, the taxpayers. They don't want to give us a blank check.
I understand those issues because some of those contractual negotiations happened long before you, when you were in the middle school, when you were in Keaveney, when I was in the middle school. I know somewhat of the history of how it all came. They had plenty of people now, but nobody wants to understand. I know it from 2 perspectives. I've gone from Central Station to the Hill doing an EMS call, taken a significant amount of time with a large piece of apparatus. I've also done one on a family member coming from Waterville, beating the apparatus out of Central and the people out of Central. And I also know historically that when they move a company or they get rid of a company, they also get rid of people. And that's strictly something that you all do from this building. That's my opinion from somebody that lives up on the hill. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Gillies here, lifelong resident of the city and involved in the political part, being an elected official. I'm not too familiar with the plan with the firemen or the plan with the administration. What I am familiar with is one thing, and I spoke on it to all you people one time or the other. On the Hill, we should have a fire truck, and there should be no doubt, if you can put the ambulance there, that'd be perfect. If that's a perfect solution, I don't know why you're wasting any time. That's my only opinion.
I just said anything different.
Sean Van Sleet, The Orchard.
A lot of people know what happened to me, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's fact. I wouldn't be here. And I'm not for certain if it's due to the Hill Street being open, but this man here can vouch for me, and I've known him all my life. The fire department made it to Harmony Hill in 4 minutes when I had a massive heart attack. I would not be here today if it took them longer than 4 minutes to get there. I've been to every safety meeting, everything. I'm an advocate for these guys because they saved my life. We need that Hill Street. It's right here. This is your campaign promise. If you couldn't keep up and back the promise, you should have never made it. That's what the people see. They elected you on a promise and you didn't fulfill it. There's too much of that going on in politics now. Everybody makes a promise, and then all of a sudden they get elected and they get amnesia. If you make a promise that you can't keep, you shouldn't have made it in the first place. This is your thing. As mayor, I will keep the Leach Street Firehouse open 24/7.
Indeed, in all the conversations I had with the fire union at that time, I suggested that if I, fully staffed the fire department, everything would be A-okay, and it would be open 24/7. But the reality is that the contracts that they have, they take they take the bulk of their vacation time and personal time and sick time between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And
Well, we did try to change that last negotiations, Mayor. I'm sorry to interrupt again because I got sidetracked. We tried to change that, but unfortunately the city attorney couldn't compromise or couldn't figure out what we're trying to do. There's 12 weeks we will not touch pretty much throughout the year because they're one-day vacations. We take vacation weeks. We try to make it vacation days. Same amount of time, nothing more. They'll open those 12 weeks up, and Brian couldn't comprehend that.
Well, we can reopen it.
We tried to, I'm not reopening up, we tried, negotiations are coming in a year and a half, I will open it up again. Unless you want to do an MOA, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We tried to do that to benefit the city, it benefits us, it worked both ways. And Brian felt that you couldn't figure that out and why we were out there, basically screw the city, we were not. We also tried giving our birthdays up for personal time, just to let you know, because you were at the meeting, you were downstairs, to try to stop that and just cut down the work and the overtime for your birthdays too. So we did try last time around.
I'm not sure how, taking 24 hours personal leave versus.
Could be taking smaller blocks. Most guys don't take 24 as a personal. You open those 12 weeks up besides.
I'm happy to have that conversation.
Well, I wish you could go to the meeting. It would have been great for us. We would have sat down and talked like men, not you downstairs or we're upstairs, and I can talk to Brian until I'm blue in the face.
Okay, well, my door's open.
Okay, next negotiation, remember that.
Well, isn't part of the management?
Or do you want to do it sooner?
We can do it sooner. If the members want to talk about it, we'll talk about it.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've got 27 years of middle management. I was a dispatcher for a trucking company. You're trained to be down to set your program up or your work order that day. You should figure on being down 2 people all the time. For cases when there's people that have scheduled time off and there's also people that call in. You can't control that, people's livelihoods. But I know for one thing, when I've asked more than one of these firemen, what is a good day? No calls or we saved a life. That's a good day. And I am living proof that I had a good day that day.
If you guys call in sick and your schedule is 45 people, that's wonderful. You can handle that. But your platoon is 8 people and 2 people.
Well, 3 are at 8 and 1's at 7. Just to let you know, 1's at 7. We're not fully staffed yet. We're still
Jeff Lonzak, Berkeley Avenue, also a firefighter.
This is not a suspension. This was the last year for termination.
You keep talking about 2 people calling in and that every shift's at 8. We haven't had a... Hold on.
An organized meeting, and he's talking, for one person talking.
I agree.
Hear what they're saying?
You're talking about 2 people calling in, right? And every shift has 8? Every shift hasn't had 8 in about 4 years. I just want to put that out there. Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Okay, and when was the last time we had a 32-man department?
32-man department? Very recently.
When?
Last year?
I don't think so. Because we were down 2 firefighters for about 2 years. Before that, we were down 4 firefighters for at least a year.
I increased manpower over
Yeah.
here. I filled it completely. I added one. And then there was just one more person going in sick. It just didn't work.
All right. I'm just pointing out there, we haven't had a full department Why?
You have the same size as the police department, there is not a sick leave.
Well, we're down to 30 right now, so that's not 32. You have 2 7-man departments. Or 2 7-man shifts.
Suspension, sick leave?
I just have an observation,
Oh, yeah.
a thought, the sick leave. I mean, our firefighters are going into homes, and they are over people who are sick, who are needing transportation. So, I mean, the fact that they may call in sick may be accurate, I don't know, but it would be, kind of make sense, right? If there's someone who is taking care of someone who is very ill, the fact that they could contract something and be sick would be feasible, that they're,
I don't disagree with you, Ringo.
I mean, that would
Something the
make
police
sense.
department deals with the same type of people. It's just a systemic problem with the fire department. I see it every day. I get the daily messages.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't agree that we've been staffed at that 32 because any of the research we did on that task force, and I mean, Sean, I think that you know that that's
This is the first time that there's been a vacancy, and it's due to a retirement.
That is not accurate.
Ringo, stop in, I'll show you.
I would love to,
Okay.
because all of the research that I did, and we can go through all of the notes.
I'll
Show everyone.
the daily reports. Anyone else?
Paul Miller, 31 Pleasant Street. I live next to the Hill Station. It's one of the reasons I purchased that house, is because the comfort of having firemen right next to me was good. Now, I'm not the only one in the 5th Ward or on the Hill. There's a lot of us up there, and I would suggest that if we look at our tax base, you'll find that a large percentage of the revenue comes from the Hill. And a large percentage of the taxpayers on the Hill do want that station open for fire services. That's, we talked about that when you were walking past my house.
I agree 100%. I live on the hill.
Yep.
My extended family lives on the hill.
Yep.
And
So,
I'm a taxpayer.
as you know, I've always been a proponent of municipal employees. I believe municipal employees are the heart and soul of a community. And I am proud as a taxpayer to provide working class jobs to municipal employees, as opposed to privatized employees. If this is a fiscal matter, which it sounds like it is, we have budgetary issues, I say we put it to a referendum. And if that requires some kind of a change in code to achieve, I say we do it. Because I guarantee you, the people of Cohoes, as opposed to the rent seekers who look at Cohoes like a investment opportunity, want additional services and want more services. And if it's put to a referendum, I bet you'd find that out.
What is it, Paul, you put to a referendum?
Whether we expand services for the ambulatory service into municipal services, and whether we expand the fire department so that it can be fully housed. Full proponent of that. And we could find out exactly how much that would cost per taxpayer as a percentage. And if we put that to a referendum, I guarantee you it'll pass. I've been wrong before, so maybe it will not, right? It, of course, depends upon how it's presented. But I propose that as a solution, because I can tell you this, as a resident, I don't want to lose a fire truck. And I know we're talking about potentially and maybe not, and maybe.
No, we're not.
So, okay, well, for now, right, for now. The problem isn't now, the problem is a year from now or 2 years from now when we decide it's a redundant.
Yeah, some future matter may change.
100%, but again, reducing it from the hill and moving it down and consolidating it makes that a lot more possible. And that's just the way it is.
Well, no decision has been made, and, I'm open to suggestions.
Yep.
The fire chief has weighed in differently than what I've heard tonight.
Yep.
At least with me. I sit with the fire officers, try to get down there monthly.
Yep.
And I've heard from different members of the union, none of whom are present, but, they have a different take on it. But yeah, I've never been a fireman. I defer to the chief
Yep.
and the officers.
Yep, and I appreciate that. And again, this is more of a general statement about government and what we do. And if we're looking for fiscal savings, I want you to consider the social cost and what's more important. Because the other important thing about municipal employees that's very, very important is it provides a work pipeline for residents. I love that I can look out the back of my house while I'm doing my gardening and see Umholtz out there. I love that I know most of these people, right? And that they live in my community. I know they care. And that's the difference between having a privatized ambulatory service and a municipal ambulatory service. So again, if you guys can be creative and think about what you can do to expand services for us, and then bring it to us. That's all I'm asking. You know, all the other stuff I don't really care about, but I do care about having employees that I pay for with my taxes that live here and can earn a living here. And that's really, really important. And one of the big problems in the nation right now is the loss of community. I'm asking you to fight for us. That's it.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Ask the chief, as you're sitting behind there, how many officers we want to add to the PBM referendum too, because people are constantly, they could justify having more police officers, we could justify having more firefighters. But cost is a consideration.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Anybody else? Let's close the floor to public.
I'm just going to piggyback off Margaret Giller, 31 Pleasant Street. Two things to say. First of all, about the library facility that you're talking about selling, I think it's a travesty that I understand the blight. I understand that it's vacant. I understand it's open for crime and, things that we certainly have to act on. I think it is a travesty that we would think about cutting that building up and putting more rental properties in here. I don't believe personally as a resident that we need any more non-owner occupied properties here. I think as also being very involved in the school district, we see kind of residual effects of transitional housing and what that means to our community, and people who are not born and raised here, don't follow, have our same values. I think it is a challenge for us. I appreciate, the fact that they are talking about keeping the facade of the building the same and cleaning it up and restoring it. But I do think it's a shame if we were to put rental properties in there. I know that you said no tax breaks, but I did hear you say sales tax breaks, so I'm not sure where that falls into place. As far as the firehouse on the hill, kind of what Rainbow said, as far as the school district is involved, you have the central station with Abram Lansing's in middle school. We've got the island, which serves Van Skyke, and, the Hill Station serves Harmony Hill and the high school. And the truth of the matter is, the high school is the most active of all of the school buildings. I think it provides a little bit of comfort and security to know that there are responders there pretty regularly and who could be there at a moment's notice. I think that, with Sean also, as an employee, speaking to, we are one of the biggest employers, if not the biggest employer in the entire city. And I think it's important to make sure that our staff and our families know that there is a quick response there if there was an emergency. New York State, don't know if you heard about it, but they're talking about changing graduation requirements. I think, also serving municipal services in our community, building pipelines for education, building programs where kids can learn, to be an EMT or a fireman or a police officer. They're talking about changing the whole outlook of what it looks like to be a graduate, and maybe that is a grow your own program. And what better than people who we're raising in our community to then serve our community as public servants. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Margaret. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to a discussion regarding an amendment to the approved annual paving list. So I think April, we've got some additions. Does anybody else have any additions to the paving list? So you get that, and you got that from the end, and we'll vote on that. All right, next is a discussion regarding the Hill Firehouse. Gentlemen?
So, for you that don't know me, I'm Sean Higgins, second ward councilman and public safety chair. When we were elected over a year ago, the big topic of conversation was ambulance and the service that they provided to the residents of the city. As a council, as a public safety committee, as residents, there was a lot of people that came to our meetings. The mayor was able to go back out to RFP, which at that time we were able to hire Mohawk as our ambulance provider for the city. After that was awarded to Mohawk, the next conversation was, what do we do with Mohawk? Where do we put them? The big difference between Mohawk and ambulance is that Mohawk is a union organization. They have a collective bargaining unit. They have standards that they want their employees to abide by, and they have the rights to live in sanitary conditions. The residence right now where we house ambulance is a bay with, without AC. The conditions were not sustainable for Mohawk. So the conversation with Mohawk was they came to our last meeting. I thought it was a great meeting. Mohawk gave us a couple options. They have asked for a dedicated use of the Hill Station. Just to clarify, the dedicated use of the Hill Station would be that they would keep their ambulance there, and they would have a 3-year lease on that station, and then after the 3 years, when their contract is up and lease is up, we would revisit the situation with them and what's going on in the city. Their second option would be to continue housing the firefighters up there, and they would have to still build out a part of that station. Because they're union, they would have to have living quarters and separate areas for their employees, which was not an issue. And then the third, there was conversations about them maybe looking at lots within the city where they could rent a building within the city. Through all these conversations, there's been, a possibility of, we could house, we could create a hub, we can build this as, a central location for Mohawk to service Rensselaer County and Sankey County, Albany County, but there's no guarantee that that could happen. There's also no guarantee that Mohawk could stay. I mean, there's an option where if we, don't give them this, or we don't give them that, if we don't, if we make them be a mobile ambulance where they have to stay out of their ambulances while they're working, they could cut the contract. And there's nothing saying that, the mayor can't go out to RFP and go out for a rebid a year from now, and all of a sudden now we're facing the same thing we did a year ago, where we're facing multiple agencies trying to bid to come back into the city. There was a lot of work with the EMS task force before I was elected. We have worked hard as a committee. I mean, my belief is that, there should be a 3-5-year plan. There should be a plan from after my time, after everybody's time, where, we move to a BLS system, where we get our firefighters trained to be paramedics, where we maybe, buy an ambulance and move to our own self-sustained ambulance system. There's nothing saying we can't do it. Other places have done it. But those are the topics that we talked about, and I would like to really thank everybody for coming out, because it shows that everybody cares. This has been a discussion that we've had for
come there has been no plan, and we keep revisiting this. I think I started hanging around the firehouse when I was about 12, and there still isn't a plan, and I'm almost 65 years old. What's the problem? Why isn't there a plan for fixing the firehouses like they should be, or building the fire station where they should be so that they can properly house firefighters and/or ambulance services? Why are they closing the Hill, or even considering closing the Hill? Because like I said, the history is, you just keep ticking back until one time the only thing that'll be here is the fire chief and 2 guys on the island, because he needs an office. That's about it. So I just think that maybe the folks up there need to gather them and come up with a 5-year plan. The Chinese did it in 49, look where they are now. 5-year plans.
Thank you.
That's all I have. As a council president, I'd like to say thank you to Sean and Safety Committee for all of their hard work. Certainly, took us from the last term when we initiated the task force, took our recommendations of Rainbow and our committee, so thank you. And Sean has carried that work forward, and I appreciate that, helping to find the right fit for an ambulance in the city of Cohoes. It's really reassuring to see so many of you here tonight. As the 5th Ward councilman, who lives very close to that firehouse, I want to say publicly, again, it's been in the paper several times, I am adamantly opposed to the closure of the Hill Firehouse. So that being said, I'm very happy to hear tonight that the mayor and others are very open to a shared arrangement with Mohawk and firefighters up in that, because this is not an either or. If you go to the doctor says you need a heart transplant and a brain transplant. They don't say you can have one or the other. We need EMS and fire. And so I will continue to fight for both, for the Hill residents, but more importantly for all residents. This is not a 5th Ward issue. It's not a Hill issue. It's a city issue. And we need proper coverage. So again, I'm walking away tonight feeling very happy with what I've heard. And again, thank you to Sean and the Safety Committee.
Adam, can I ask you a question? Sure. And I agree with what you just said. But let's say we go with the fire truck, we go with the ambulance. How soon can we get it done? How soon do we think we can get it done?
Those are conversations for Mohawk and
Well, how long will it take Mohawk and the administration, you guys, to get this done? Can we get it done in a month or 2 months or 3 months? We're not gonna come back here again 6 months and rehash this stuff. We've been rehashing this fire thing for a few years.
That's my
It's time we do something.
been conversations happening behind the scenes. Sean has had contact with them. Certainly assume the chief has had contact with them as well. So hopefully, there can be this.
So how can we, I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm putting all this on the spot. When do we finally say enough is enough, let's do stuff? These behind the scenes and meetings, you can't keep going around.
Lots of agreement tonight, so hopefully that's the step forward.
I feel the next step, sorry, I don't mean to.
Well, that's all right.
But I feel like the next step is to speak to Mohawk and see what their.
Oh, and how long is that gonna take to speak to Mohawk?
I mean, Chief Howard is in Florida, I believe, until.
Oh, you can make a phone call to Chief Five tonight and ask him, this stuff doesn't take long.
I know that they've already been at this.
I've been in the game long to know how you stall things. And I'm not saying we're doing that, but let's not get into that.
Well,
These things
Mohawk
can be
does
resolved.
not need a tour of Central Station, John, to get back to your original question. They were housed there for, we housed an ambulance down there for a while. So I don't see any reason why Mohawk couldn't slide right in there with one ambulance and a fire truck, and one ambulance and one fire truck up the hill. That's fine with me, I like that.
So, Bill, if I could, 2 years ago, the chief called me for an estimate up at the fire station on the hill. Because that was one of the things they wanted to house one fire truck in one bay, one ambulance in the other bay, because that bay is pretty deep in there. It's not obviously the biggest, but they wanted us to frame it in, put a bunkhouse in there, and then update the first floor bathrooms, so then that way, Mohawk or whoever the ambulance people at that point in time would have a common room, 4 bunks for their personnel, and the first floor bathroom. I gave them a price off the top of my head, I don't remember what it was like $42,000 to do.
High 30s.
Yep, high 30s, is that something that we can revisit, and then that way we can keep the truck there on the hill, if we can figure out how to raise that money, I can still build it out, or we can put it back out for bid, and get somebody to price it out, to build that out, that way we can keep both there and keep both citizens happy.
And my understanding was that Mohawk was gonna pay that $38,000.
Yeah, they were supposed to pay it.
But there
They
was
never
not
did.
enough room for a fire truck.
Yeah, no, so the fire truck was still gonna fit in the bay, because the way that we were gonna frame it, we were gonna build it out. So why don't we do that? That solves all the problems. We can revisit it, we can frame it in their bunkhouse, renovate the bathroom, I'd be willing to do it. And let's figure out how to raise the money.
Are there any objections to having one of the buildings on the island? Because it seems like one of the buildings, there's two vehicles possibly in the central and then on Hill. Is there a way to visit the idea of having one?
That's all.
I think just the idea of geographically covering the city.
Not the city.
Yeah,
Because
or like
the Hill Station is closed about a third of the time because of, the fire truck's not there, so it's better to at least have one, if not, both of them station, ambulance station on the hill, either one at Central or one on the hill.
Yeah, it just seems like if there
Yeah,
were cars going right in between, we're kind of isolated down there.
It's really not, and that's the theory behind it, but if there's anybody on the fire department that could tell me that they can think of one case where a fire truck has ever been delayed because of a railroad track.
No, not a fire truck.
You're right. It's just never happened.
We don't really need that stat, do we? I mean, all you need is one case.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's never happened.
Let's
I
not
mean,
wait for that.
you could prepare for, every possible contingency.
The fact that we're here planning this at a council meeting is scary.
Like,
We're not prepared with any plans.
There's plenty of plans.
It sounds very clear tonight.
No, I mean, the fire department may not like it that the plan involves a private ambulance. We got a 3-year contract. We would like a 5-year plan that turns the ambulance services over to the fire department, but that's not working out in Troy. It hasn't worked out elsewhere. And, it's a separate issue, but, to get back to the Hill Station, it's just to cover the geography, it's better to have at least a.
It's just concerning because I did find a place that was open for lease, so I just gave it to the chief just as an option. And even if it wasn't,
Yeah,
a
right,
good fit,
Jackson.
his response was that it was too far. But then I could easily reply vice versa, because if the island is too far for the people near Hill, then obviously Hill is too far for people on the island.
I mean, this is a 3.5 square mile city that would work all over the state and nowhere north of Manhattan that I can think of that has 3 fire stations, 3.5 square miles. Okay. Any other?
I just say to Carl's point, if we're talking about 38 to 42,000, I think Mr. Hill made it very clear for us. We have taxpayer money. We are entrusted, as the council's entrusted, and the mayor, as fiduciary. We have fiduciary responsibility. I think very good use of 38 to 40 something thousand dollars would be to fix this problem so we can house the services that we need for the residents. We're talking about $4 million, 40,000.
Just so that conversation's been had, and Mohawk said that they were willing to do it.
Okay.
Anything else? Yes, please, no? All right.
Yes, I have a suggestion.
Public comment period is
Mayor?
closed.
I'm not done yet. Thank you. I have a suggestion, and I ain't being a wise guy by saying this. Why don't you go into executive session like we do quite often? And resolve some of this right now so the residents out there can know that we're beyond planning, and we're gonna put a fire truck in there, and we're gonna put an ambulance in there.
That's to be determined when we're talking Mohawk.
Well, he seems to think Mohawk could go along with it. When can we get this? I am so frustrated with all this stuff going on, being a lifelong resident and knowing how things should be done and prolonging things. I just think it's time something's done. Take the political out with the firemen, take the political out with the politicians, and let's talk to the residents. They want something done. I know we get 18,000 people. I look around this room and I see people that got invested interest. I don't see the 18,000 people that are dissatisfied with Cohoes, because they're not. That's why they live here. This has always been a great community. The only problem we have is the nonsense politics. It flusters every time. But overall, this is a great community. And the service has always been great. And I'm not going to stand by that. As the oldest guy in the room, and the longest resident, I can say that type of stuff because I've been here to see it. So I think you should take action right now. Tell the public out there what we're going to do. Not planning, no more board meetings, none of that stuff. Then you guys go into your special session and resolve this stuff. And then come back and tell us. That's all I have to say.
All right, with that, we'll close the floor to public comment and move into the special meeting. Okay, with that, we'll reopen the floor to public comment.
Hi, I'm Teresa Bourgeois, Central Avenue Cohoes, and former Director of Operations who worked on the former Cohoes building. I have a written statement, try to get through it quickly. Shirley. Teresa Bourgeois, Cohoes resident, Central Avenue. To talk about the building. For more than 130 years, the iconic building at 169 Mohawk Street has served a public purpose for the people of our community. Completed and opened in 1895, it was home to St. John's Episcopal Church for more than 75 years, serving leading industrialists and workers who together helped power the mills and the community. The city purchased the building in the 1970s and converted it into the Cohoes Human Resource Center. During the last 50-plus years, it has served a variety of municipal purposes, most notably and consistently until 2020 as home to the Cohoes Public Library. Over time, it's also housed Model Cities programs, housing initiatives, job training, and other municipal community development projects and programs, along with an array of not-for-profit initiatives, including most recently the Parsons Child and Family Services. Also, by the way, Bill Robinson, who many of you know, he was the rodent control program there. In early municipal years, it also gained attention, including in the New York Times, for the innovative Cohoes Tool Library that was housed there. The building has been home to a replica of the Cohoes Mastodon, a historic clock, infamous Moosehead, and much more. Along the way, the building has received recognition, including awards for adaptive reuse of historic church, an additional notice when it last underwent a comprehensive renovation in 1984. The building is a contributing structure to the designated Cohoes Downtown Historic District. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places and the River Spark Heritage Area. In her remarks at March 2024 announcement of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative Awards, Governor Kathy Hochul praised the mayor for his vision in working to restore and revitalize the library and the historic building in which it is housed. So why do I talk about all of this? Why do I note this? Because as the Common Council prepares to vote on the future of the building, it's essential to remember its past and consider its potential. This is not just any building. As Mayor Keeler noted during his 2019 mayoral campaign and consistently until the summer of 2023, this is one of our 3 key municipal anchor buildings in the community. The resolution under consideration declares that there is no municipal purpose for the building, and it should be sold to BDJ Capital LLC. This raises 3 core questions to be considered. Number 1, what was the analysis to determine that there is no longer a municipal purpose for the building? Did that analysis include consideration not just of the needs of the current administration, but of future mayors? This is particularly relevant given the recent loss of our community center, which was another vital gathering space. And I do want to thank Gil and the county legislators, so at least it's in county hands now rather than the private hands, but it's still a big loss. As John, I'm sure you know, it's a big loss to our community. Question number 2. Does BDJ Capital, Mr. Byron Diaz and Mr. Carl Godfrey, have successful experience as developers managing the adaptive reuse of a historic church? Is that something you folks have researched? Have you researched and toured their listed notable projects? Are you familiar with Flanagan Square? Did any of you tour Flanagan Square? No. So Flanagan Square is one of the 3 buildings that they noted on the application. And that, of the 3 of the quote-unquote notable buildings, only one is a historic building. That's Flanagan Square, so-called Flanagan Square in Troy. And in fact, it's not a church, it's an old factory, which is very different than doing a church. The other buildings, the first, and they are not the listed developer for that building. First Columbia is the listed developer. And so do you know, have you researched what their role was in that building that they list? I don't know if Steve has or others in vetting them. I don't know. The other listed projects include a new build, Gilderland Apex Apartments. United Group is a listed developer on that one. And were any of you aware of that it's a new build, not a historic build? And again, not listed as the developer. So I don't know, do you know what their roles were as they listed that? I mean, what was the vetting process is a core question. And then there's a third building that they list. It's called Saratoga Stonequist. It appears it built about a 1970s build. Again, they're not listed as the developer there. Not clear what the role was. So the question is, did all of you vet that? Did you, any of you before this vote, research that? Have you researched and toured any projects, including historic preservation projects, that they were the lead developer on? Have any of you? Yes? No? No? And do you know, and were there any church buildings converted into apartments specifically that you might have researched to understand if they have the capacity to handle the building? That's, I think, an important question. Notably, when I try to research them, I didn't find examples of historic preservation and or adaptive reuse of churches when searching online. I'm not saying they haven't done any, I'm saying that I could not find any online. When I did search, I searched BDG Capital, and I just see their incorporation papers. When I searched Byron Diaz, listed in Schenectady under BD Upstate Construction as a drywall expert, which we need more of those. And there's Remodel Now website, which appears to be inactive. They have an active presence on Facebook. They predominantly note that they are, quote, "We are available for residential and light commercial projects." So again, I didn't find any evidence of experience with adaptive reuse of large historic churches, which are very complicated. So I'm wondering if any of you have. And have you talked with any of your counterparts in municipalities? Mayor, I don't know if you or Steve have, or any of you, in which they've done projects and completed these complex adaptive reuse of large historic structures, including churches and converting them to apartments. One thing to convert a church to a public use, but to apartments, much trickier, as I've talked to other people about. And then the last question is, does BDJ Capital LLC, Mr. Byron Diaz and Carl Gottfried, do they have adequate funding to complete this comprehensive restoration, the adaptive reuse of this historic building? For the bid, quote, estimates for the construction of the building is in the $2.6 to $2.8 million range. So did they provide a breakdown of the costs that add up to that total cost? How much for the HVAC, how much for the electrical, how much for the tower, all this stuff. So have you seen a breakdown of how they get to $2.8 million, how they're able to complete the project with $2.8 million? Nobody? Nobody's seen it. Have you talked with any disinterested third-party developers to determine if the costs appear to be viable to those who do historic preservation work? Yes? No? Mayor? No? Steve? No. And does this estimate factor into the recent significant shift in the economy where everybody, I'm sure if you're a builder, you're nervous, right? I'm trying to get my house about all the increased costs because of the market crash in the last few weeks, right? It's gone crazy. I was talking to a construction person today, and it's different, right? We're entering a whole new world. So your decision, your vote to sell this historic building is historic itself, right? To transfer such a, until recently, vital part of our community into private hands for a private purpose after 130 years of public use will permanently alter our community. It's essential that the company selected to purchase such a historic part of our community be thoroughly vetted to ensure that they have the skills and financial capacity to get the job done right. They have to be not just eager, but they have to be able to preserve this city landmark. So my core question is, have they been thoroughly vetted? I don't know the answer to that question, but I hope before you vote to turn this building over to them, that you have answered that question. And I want to be clear that it looks like the work you do, I see online, is beautiful work. but it's not, it doesn't appear, and maybe I'm not just finding it, to be this kind of work. And so have they been vetted? And I want to speak to the police chief, talked about the problem with squatters. And that is a problem when you vacate a building. And I know, Steve, you can attest to this, the bank building, and Amanda, you'll remember too, the bank building had squatters in it when we brought somebody in. Remember that? We had the problem with people living in that. It's a problem with vacant buildings. This building needs to be brought back to life one way or the other. I just wonder if each of you, before you cast this very important vote on an essential historic building, have done the proper vetting to ensure that, not that they're just eager, but they have capacity to do something that's very difficult. Thank you for your
They
time.
have vetted him to the extent that we vetted the folks who took over the St. Agnes School and rehabilitated that.
But that's,
And it's very similar. First project, of that nature.
Maybe with all due respect, we're not gonna spend $230,000, put $2.6 million in this building to fail. It's
well,
personal money.
with all due respect, Mayor, redoing a school is very different than redoing that church. I know I've walked through that church a million times with a lot of experts to try to learn, because I was following up on your request that I renovate it. And we talked to developers who were thinking about it, right, Steve? And they were looking around the city for possible projects. And that church, the numbers, they kept saying the numbers just would not add up for us on that church to make it apartments. And so apartments in a school building, apartments in a factory building where they're squared off, hard, but not nearly as hard as a church. So, but
It's
have
not
you,
apples to apples, but I mean,
it's very, very
little
different.
apples to oranges, but I mean, St. Agnes School was crumbling, sort of.
And they're
like
doing it
down,
beautiful.
And they did it, it's beautiful.
But remember, there was almost a year, probably way too much back and forth with those poor folks. They hung in there a long time to go back and forth and show designs and redesigns and reconfigure. I mean, even, are there 25 parking spaces in that one parking lot? Fundamental questions like that, because they're gonna need at least those. So, but,
There's 34.
We have.
so the question is,
Zero for St. Agnes, they're all on-street parking.
well, that was a big issue that's why I mentioned parking, because of the St. Agnes one, I think I went to 5 IDA meetings about the parking. But have you talked with historic preservation people who have experience with restoration of churches to really understand what goes into this, and do they have the capacity to do it? That's all I'm asking.
You know, I talked to Mark Thaler, and that's his line of work.
Right, and did he say that they can do this for $2.8 million?
Well, the folks that thought they could do St. Agnes for 2.8 ended up spending, I think, 3.6. And Carl has already said that he is prepared, he's got the financing, he's not gonna spend $230,000 to purchase it, sink $2.3 million into it, and then abandon it because it needs another $1 million.
Well, we have a number of abandoned buildings like that here where people thought they could do it and couldn't. And if it was going to be $2.8 million, Mayor, then the core question is, why didn't the city do it for the library? Because we had $1 million and we were in line to apply for $2.3 million, and you had money, other money. So if you really thought you could do that.
If that was the case, if we had all that millions of dollars, we would have done it.
Okay, well, we had $1 million. We were scheduled in 2023 to apply for $2.5 million, and you're putting $2.6 million of the DRI money. So even if you didn't get any more, if you had $1 million plus 2.6, that's 3.6. No, but you have DRI money committed to a library. Well, he pulled it because he wanted that building. He wanted that library. That's why he pulled it. He was committed to that, but he was committed to that building. And we lost a $154,000 grant when the funders read in the paper that you were selling the building. So we lost another $154,000 there. So, in any case, I will let others say. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Good evening, Patricia Sibilia, Cohoes resident, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters, but I am not here in that capacity at all. I am also an employee of United Group, the development company that built the Apex at Cross Gates, as well as a lot of other residential communities, both in the area and up and down the eastern seaboard. I understand, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago when this ordinance was discussed, but I understood it was unanimously agreed to pause to do more look at it. And I was happy to hear that, because I think one of the things is we need to do due diligence, especially as a person who's been on the other side of the fence and as a developer and dealing with many municipalities. I see the due diligence that goes on with a lot of municipalities in vetting projects. I don't know, and I'm curious as to why this came to special meeting instead of proceeding at its regular pace. So why do we have a special meeting tonight? Is there something that's rushing this rather than having it just be held at the next meeting?
Because when it was tabled, the understanding was there would be a special meeting a couple weeks out, and we'd vote on it then.
Okay, so 2 weeks was...
Teresa mentioned, or at least alluded to the tariffs that are coming.
Correct.
Carl's locked in at a price through his supplier, and that price, one that comes from Canada, it comes from South America, and it's going up dramatically. We know that.
Understood completely. I understand that quite well in the business that I'm involved in. Why was the property sold at auction? I mean, to me, the ordinance really state that it was listed in the official paper for just 2 weeks. Why didn't we, if we felt that we needed to sell this property, why didn't we do it with a real market listing and get what is the market price for it instead of doing it at auction?
So it didn't go to auction. We put out a request for proposals, and we had walked the major developer through there in the hope that, this is his type of, central warehouse, big project, that this would be nothing. Whatever happened, came back for the RFP. There was only the one who applied for the RFP, and that was Carl and Byron Diaz.
Okay, your ordinance does say it's at auction, just so that you know. So at this point, I am familiar with the group's work as a drywaller. They are excellent at it. They are not only doing the Apex at Crossgates, but 2 other projects, and they're very good at what they do.
All the big developers use Byron Diaz.
Yep, exactly. I understand, because I'm in that boat. But this is their first development project, from what I see and understand. And with that, there's some concerns that immediately come to mind. So first is that in the proposal, it states that the target market is professional workers looking to rent upscale apartments. This is part of the work I used to do. As a in the development team, I would look at the market analytics. But the size of the units that he's proposing is so much smaller than average. So in order to keep the cost per square foot down, I know what it's like to work a pro forma, a financial pro forma, to make the numbers work. And we actually keep our bedrooms actually sized between 850 and 950 square feet. His bedroom units, 1-bedroom units, are sized at 550 to 650. That is extremely small. And his 2-bedroom units are even smaller than our typical 1-bedroom unit. So is he going to be able to fill the units if that's really the market he's going after? Those are very small units. And if you want an upscale professional, I doubt they want to move into what would be looked at as almost a studio apartment.
From the developer that I spoke to very recently, the one that did this thing, he just told me that the smaller the apartment was what people are looking for now. And Steve, I don't know if you can speak, Sharon's not in her head, yes, but I mean the micro apartments on Remsen Street, because of the way it's occupied, right?
Interesting. That's not what we find, but that's interesting. Okay. And looking at the financial model in the proposal, I think the only way those numbers are going to work, knowing typical construction costs per square foot, are really going to be if he's doing all the work himself, which I think is...
Stated that it's all
exactly.
self-performed.
Yes.
Mr. Diaz has 90 employees, I have 15.
Yep.
It's going to be self-performed between us.
Yeah, that's great. That's
how the numbers work.
Yeah, and with that though, I think that, as we just said, the construction market is changing. And it's changing. In order to really go out and purchase, and yes, the tariffs are coming, you would have to have closed and fully financed before you would place an order. So the order is yet to come, correct? You're not going to order now without a...
Most of that building, we're using cash funds.
Okay, but the cost of the materials, you haven't ordered them yet. You're not going to until you can know that you got the deal. So what I'm concerned about is the financials and based on how tight they are, and it's great that it is self-funded and basically they're doing their own work, but I would be a little bit cautious about where we are, where it's going to go financially. And you're taking on a risk, and I understand that as
We'll sell you the building if you fail.
Okay. One other thing of note was that when I listened to the auditor, I completely understood what he's talking about with capital projects. I think that based on that and the closeness I've been around the proposal with the bank building going to be proposed as a library, the funding there for DRI does not cover a lot of necessary costs. That DRI proposal was based on work that was done by an architect in September of 2023, and it didn't include a lot of things that are absolutely necessary, like furniture and fixtures. It doesn't include doing the basement, and it doesn't include the professional services that are necessary to really make the building work. So I would be very cautious about us really committing until we do the homework and really understand, put our arms around the true costs of that project and understand that we still do need a home for the library. So I appreciate the time.
Chuck, if you thought we were going to build, we were taking out.
Oh, I completely know that.
There's
I've
no
been in
reason
the
why it's
shoes.
so-
Know that in person.
Hello. Actually, in regards to what she had said, they're marketing it to young professionals. This apartment. I wouldn't consider myself young, but I am what he would probably be one of those professionals. I work at a biotech company. I moved here back in August of 2024, and the reason I moved here was from Oakland, California, to Cohoes, was because of the reasonably priced rent. Now, I'm going to say up front, I'm not paying over $2,000 for a shoddily built apartment unit. No. That's exactly what they do over there. If I want that, I'll go move back. Because, even $1,400 is too much for this area. Your biggest issue is you have slumlords. I've seen them. And the thing is, I would propose building more tenant-owned housing. We don't have a housing crisis because of a low supply of housing. We have a housing crisis because we have too many corporate landlords and too many small mom and pops who have like five, and by mom and pop I mean over $10 million, who own a fourth of the properties here. Get these properties tenant owned, or if you want to build this church out for residents, make it tenant owned. Make it where it's something that's municipality owned, where these people can live and then they can generate revenue for you. But just privatizing everything it's going to be disastrous. And what you're opening yourself up to here is gentrification. And I can tell you, it's going to be great and pretty right now, but then in like 5 to 10 years, your economy is going to tank. That's what's happening right now in the Bay Area, where all these gentrifiers came in. They all love the history. People moved to Oakland because of the Black Panthers, and now all of a sudden that the tough times are there. They all left, and the economy is in shambles, and that's what you're looking at here. And I'm proposing this. I get you have great ideas. I get you want to build something, but be cautious with this. What you are opening, the floodgates you're opening, they can't be closed. And I think you should put this into consideration.
Nobody's taking your apartment away from you. The beauty of Cohoes is there's the whole range, from very affordable to the 2,500, 2,300 that people are
For now.
already paying.
Give it time.
Hi, Danielle Cherniak, 415 Leaf Boulevard, Cohoes. I'd just like to touch on some of the earlier comments talking about adaptive reuse of churches. Churches tend to be much more complex spaces than, say, like as earlier pointed out, a factory building or a school because of the configuration, the height of the roofs, the position of windows. And I just wonder, I know you've planned out apartments in this building. I wonder if you worked out like the window spacings and positioning for the apartments and to keep the exterior structure, because it's really important to keep the exterior appearance and not change any window openings or spacings. So yeah, that's a really important thing to consider. So it do become a complex project because of the different configuration of churches as opposed to like a more block-shaped building. So that's an important thing to take into consideration and when the work. And another thing, I've heard sandblasting mentioned again this evening.
No, Dan was just rectifying what he
But
said.
it's really, really important that you consult with the State Historic Preservation Office before doing any exterior cleaning of buildings, because they have experts there. They're on Peebles Island, and they're very accessible and can provide information. But it's very important in maintaining the exterior structure to if you're going to do the cleaning, to do it according to historic preservation guidelines.
Yeah, it's what we're going to work with Steve to do that and then get in touch with them to do so.
You work with Danielle regarding the 40-minute police review.
Yeah, they help me design mostly the exterior of the building, picking the colors, picking the windows.
Yeah. Anything else? Once, twice, all right. Close that floor to public comment. I just want to say that this 150-year-old building is architecturally beautiful. Everybody wants to save the building. The goal of this ordinance is to save the building. Since 2015, the city has put $350,000 into that building. Without additional funds, the building will continue to deteriorate, and it serves no municipal purpose. It's a beautiful building, but it's a money pit, and it's become a liability, and not just recently, but it's been a liability. Kids break the windows, people are breaking in. Most recently, over the weekend, to steal the copper lines. There's drug users shooting out, needles are all over the place. During the winter, we get slip and fall concerns, so much so that the insurer has called enough that I suspect that they may be dropping coverage on the building. Like the former Harmony Mills, which had fallen into disrepair in the 1970s, the building has also become a fire hazard. But with all that in mind, we have a rare opportunity to save this beautiful building. Again, Harmony Mills, the only viable, like Harmony Mills, the only viable answer is to sell this building to a private developer willing to invest the millions of dollars the building needs to restore it. So with that in mind, we put out the RFP, and as I mentioned, we only had a single bidder on it. I toured the building with Carl, and I was just impressed by the way he could reimagine things as we were walking through there. I mean, yeah, the idea is to put apartments in there, but I mean, he was saying, I'm going to do this here and that there, and leave that exposed, and it was very comforting to know that somebody is caring as him was willing to take ownership of this building. And it will be no small task. He's got the financial backing. He's mentioned that it's going to be totally self-funded. He's not going to the IDA for a pilot. Plans to get it on a tax roll. And he's offered a very fair price, $230,000. $230,000, that would free up, I would commit $30,000 to buy new children's books for the library. It would, $200,000, that is money that we could use to buy furniture. But most importantly, this developer will preserve and restore the building. And I think that's what we are really looking for. I mean, once it was a church, then it was a library. It's It's the building that's beautiful, it's the building that's iconic, it's not what's inside there, but in this case, he's gonna add 25 market rate apartments to young professionals to help with the vibrancy in the downtown area. Harmony Mills Lofts, they got a 30-year pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. Carl's asking for no such thing. He's willing to pay, market rate property taxes on this. Two of my alma maters present case studies. St. Agnes School, which I toured, and it was a crumbling building. I thought it was lost, and the developer, private developer came in, and he sunk $3+ million into it, and now it's beautiful to walk through. There'll be an open house at the end of this month, and it's just great that the building is saved. The other school I went to, Teresa, Danielle, I went to the same school, Keavy Academy. It's a parking lot now. So tonight, the fate of the former St. John's Church is in your hands. And this is one of the more consequential votes you'll make every time on council. And as council president and vice president, Joe Coble and George Primo led that body in support of the Harmony Mills sale and restoration. And they are fondly remembered for their efforts. So I would just ask you to, I would hope that you would be remembered as kindly for your vision in saving the St. John's Church and not for your vote that condemned it, because I don't get a vote tonight. My job is to lead the horse to water, so to speak, and it's up to you folks to make the decision. But the record will reflect that the 40th mayor brought this to the council, and I fear that the 47th mayor will be paying to have the building condemned, taken down, and nobody wants to see that happen.
I will say that I agree with Mr. Mayor that it's not this council wants to see either. A little comment that was the intent when we tabled it at the last meeting that we would pick this up at the end of the month to allow us to do our due diligence. We are grateful for people like Mr. Godfrey who are willing to invest in our city, have a vision. We just want to do our due diligence. And this is a big undertaking. We voted to table it to give ourselves some time to ask a few more questions. I know many of the council members have the opportunity to speak with you, had spoken with you specifically. We had an opportunity today to tour St. Agnes School, which is, it's a beautiful, but they did a great job. They really did. And so I would simply say that our initial goal was to give ourselves 2 more weeks. We wanted to ask, take this up again at the end of the month, and I don't think that's a big ask with such big projects.
I would ask what you've done in the intervening period, and you've heard the same comments. The thing is that, respectfully, by kicking it down the road 2 weeks, I don't want to discourage these developers from investing in Cohoes, and certainly by kicking it down the road for 2 weeks, and the tariffs, the costs, the uncertainty, is he still going to be willing to pay us $230,000 if his costs go up $20,000 or $30,000 in a couple of weeks? Maybe not. Maybe he'll come back at that point and say $200,000. And he's a businessman and he's got to cover his costs. But we'd have $30,000 less under those circumstances.
Something I'd like to say is over all my 30 years with the Public Works Department, I was through Keavy School. They tried selling that. They kept having meetings about it, and discussions turned out, well, what about the color of the window? What about this? What about that? It was never sold. Finally, the city had to take it down in an emergency. Sylvan Church across the street. Back in the early 70s, the city did take that over, and they put in, I think they had a small library in there, and they had an area for kids to come, like a hangout for kids to come and everything. And then when the windows started going bad and everything, the city, of course, didn't have the money to put into it. So they put that up for sale. And that sat there for 15 or 20 years I was the last one in that building before it was taken down, and I can tell you that over those 20 years, the roof was right into, there's a tunnel underneath that building, and the roof was right into that tunnel because they had so many discussions on selling it, and nobody could make up their minds.
It's not unlike what Gil, it's not unlike what Gil spoke to earlier about making a decision. I mean, this has been, you know, this is something that we could talk about indefinitely. But I just respectfully ask you for a thumbs up, thumbs down vote on that.
So keep me,
There's no public comment, so.
well, be accurate if it could be descriptive.
They're still, we're publicly owned at the time, they were both in private, in the hands of private people who basically was demolition by the, they didn't do anything for them. And the lease of them was municipally owned at the time.
Council President Higgins, or Council President Biggs?
No.
Did we make a motion to?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if there was a motion to be.
It's not a motion. You want a motion?
I mean, I'll speak for myself, is that I would like to table it for 2 more weeks. I apologize to you, Carl. I was out of town. I would like to do a little more research, and I can tell you that I will have a decision at the next week. That's just my personal opinion, because I'm not prepared to make a decision right now.
And before we vote, I put a motion on the floor to table this for a vote at the next, at the April council meeting.
And I have a second.
Council President Biggs? Councilmember Ida?
So we're voting to
table it?
table it. No, give the vote now. No.
Councilmember Higgins?
Yes.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCarthy?
No.
Councilmember Trudeau? Yes.
Stable. Anything else, guys?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.